It's October 2014, and Foo Fighters frontman Dave Grohl is being interviewed by Anderson Cooper on 60 Minutes. The subject of the band's name comes up, and Grohl explains, "Had I imagined that it would last more than a month and a half, I might have named it something else. It's the dumbest band name ever." What Grohl doesn't realize is how much worse it could be. Flash backwards, it's 1989, and Warren Buffett publishes his annual shareholder letter. It contains a section titled Mistakes of the First 25 Years. He begins, "My first mistake, of course, was in buying control of Berkshire." More recently, Buffett's stance has evolved. The superlative he uses to describe his investment in Berkshire is no longer first, but worst. The man's empire is a reminder of his fallibility. Okay, so what's the history here? First of all, where did that name come from? It doesn't describe anything the company does, like Burger King, or seem to have anything to do with Buffett himself, like, say, the Ford Motor Company. But it also doesn't seem like just a term that could have been chosen at random, like Apple, or made up, like Verizon. So actually, the name Berkshire Hathaway does have to do with a person and a place. It's just that it's a mashup of two of those things that happened when Berkshire Fine Spinning Association, located in Berkshire County, Massachusetts, merged with Hathaway Manufacturing Company, which was founded by Horatio Hathaway. Now, how did Buffett get involved then, and why is it such a failure? Call me crazy, but this really does seem like a comic book origin story. Back at the very beginning of Buffett's investing career, he noticed that Berkshire Hathaway was slowly shutting down and selling off its mills. This made sense because the textile industry in New England was on the decline. What piqued Buffett's interest was that the proceeds from each sale of a mill were being used to buy back large portions of the company's stock. He seemed to have identified a cigar butt situation. These scenarios that defined a lot of his early investing basically meant that if the price of something is cheap enough, it can still be a good investment. Or in terms of the analogy, a cigar butt really isn't worth anything, but if you find it just discarded while there's one puff left in it, then you found yourself a good deal. Buffett predicted that Berkshire would continue this pattern and began purchasing shares in the company for his fund, which at the time was called Buffett Partnership Limited. His hunch was correct, and after the next mill closing, Seabury Stanton, who ran Berkshire Hathaway, approached Buffett about purchasing a large portion of his shares. The men agreed on a price of $11.50, and that should have been the end of Buffett's involvement with Berkshire Hathaway. Except when the official contract arrived, the price Stanton listed was 11 3/8 per share, about 1% lower than what the two men had discussed. This slight set something off inside Buffett, and instead of letting his profits slip by 1% or demanding the papers be revised, Buffett went nuclear. He didn't sell his shares. Instead, he started buying. He bought so many shares, including a portion held by Seabury's brother Otis, that he gained control of the company. One of his first moves was to fire Stanton. So, he'd gotten his revenge, but this was well before he was wealthy enough to just be burning money because he felt like it. He describes his situation saying, "I found myself with more than 25% of Buffett Partnership's capital invested in a terrible business about which I knew very little. I became the dog who caught the car." He was forced to try his best, or rather, that's what he thought was the right thing to do, but instead it just compounded the mistake. Because after having what appeared to be a somewhat successful turnaround on his hands, an opportunity presented itself for purchasing an insurance company, NICO, or the National Indemnity Company. This was a business right in Buffett's wheelhouse. He could have purchased it directly for him and his partners, but because Berkshire was on steadier footing, he used that entity to make the purchase. The difference between owning Nikko via his partnership or owning it through Berkshire Hathaway was huge for two reasons. First, Buffett and the company owned 100% of the partnership, but they only owned about 60% of Berkshire. And second, Berkshire Hathaway's turnaround story was about to fall apart. In essence, they traded the opportunity to own all of the profits from a great company for owning only a portion of the profits of a conglomerate that contained a failing textile business that was a constant drag on the insurance company. Maybe out of stubbornness or a sense of duty, Buffett kept Berkshire Hathaway operating for almost another 20 years. At that point, of course, Berkshire Hathaway had become much more than Berkshire Hathaway, so the name stuck. In his 2014 letter to shareholders, Buffett said of the decision to use Berkshire for the Nikko purchase, "I've had 48 years to think about that question, and I've yet to come up with a good answer. I simply made a colossal mistake." How colossal were his mistakes, though? Both the purchasing of Berkshire and using it as the foundation for his empire? The man is one of the richest people on the planet, after all. Well, Buffett is much more of a fan of thinking in terms of what could have been rather than what is. He calculates the drag that Berkshire Hathaway had on his operations in the early years and the missed opportunity for compounding. By his most recent estimates, the Berkshire of today would be worth approximately $200 billion more than its present value. Just think, if his mistake was listed on the stock exchange, its market cap would place it in line with McDonald's or AT&T and Intel. Of course, his mistake is listed on the US stock exchange, at least in name. Berkshire Hathaway is to most a symbol of extreme wealth, but to Warren Buffett, it's just a reminder of a terrible mistake. Thanks for watching, guys.